wide open. Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving a 1988 first-generation Land Rover Range Rover. And far be it from me to say no to driving Dennis Reynolds' car from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This thing is absolutely gorgeous, finished in Cyprus Green with Pembroke gray leather interior and burl walnut wood trim. What's especially cool about this Cyprus Green is that the wheels are painted as well. This looks so cool with the 3 spokes and really adds to the charm of this gorgeous truck. The first generation Range Rover started in 1969 and lasted until 1996. And they weren't designed to be luxury cars. They were meant to be pretty utilitarian off-roaders back in the day, although they started giving them more and more gussied up interiors as time went on, because especially when we get into this, you know, this is no joke. This looks wonderful. This is a proper British vehicle. And the first thing you notice when you open that door is just this gorgeous frame around the door. It's very thin. I don't know how well it does in a rollover. I would not like to find out, but it is cool. It does feel, however, like you may hurt your fingers. I'm sure there's been a lot of finger accidents with this type of door. And inside, it's pretty much all business. You know, you've got your HVAC controls, a radio. Of course, you need to have your diff lock and all the goodies to make sure you don't get stuck off-road. It's powered by a 3.5-liter Buick-derived V8, and in the early cars, pre-1983 I think, they were all carbureted. This, of course, gets, I suppose you might say, upgraded with a Lucas fuel injection system. Because, of course, every British car needs to be made better with Lucas electronics. But she puts out about 155 horsepower. It does just enough. It's connected to a 4-speed ZF automatic. This one has a very cool factory brush guard, very iconic with our big fog lights up front. But even cooler than the brush guard is around back because the taillights are protected as well. So you can tell they wanted this to go off-road and get all up against some branches without cracking your taillights while you're navigating tricky terrain. I do find this fuel filler door to be hilariously large. Why? Why does this need to be so big? That's fine. I don't have any problem with it. I just find it very strange. And of course, my favorite thing in the world about a Range Rover is the split hatch. We can open like this, which means that somebody could jump in the back safely, somewhat safely, and film out of the back. These make good film cars. Top Gear used modern ones for years. But we can lower this, and then we've got loads of space back here for all of our tools and things, because after all, it is a Range Rover. Let's take a look in the back seats. Because you'd have to be a pretty cool dude to be driving this in 1988, ferrying your children around, and there are some pretty trick features back here. We've got a cigarette lighter port down here. We have a lovely armrest in the middle, nothing too fancy, but we also have an armrest on the left. You can actually drive very comfortably in the back seat of this Range Rover. Now, these seats are very high. We are sat way up in the cabin. My head is not hitting the roof, which is great. And this roof is lined in Alcantara. That's been refinished, and it looks absolutely fantastic. But you get a good view of everything back here. And when we go for a drive, the seating position, you're going to notice high as well. But you might notice we are sitting right on top of these rear wheels, so this may not be the most comfortable seating position in a stiff body-on-frame truck such as this. So let's start her up and find out what the 80s were like for Great Britain's off-roaders. Classy off-roaders. We've got a million lights up here. Jumps to life with our exuberant tachometer. But you don't get much in the way of gauges. We've got coolant temperature, a fuel gauge, a tach, and a speedo. So we don't have oil pressure or oil temperature. We do, however, have luxurious power windows, and they are quite large windows. It takes a while for those to go up, not because they're slow, but just because that's a pretty significant distance. Now I've got armrests for myself as well, very comfortable, something that's been carried through the generations as the Range Rovers evolved. And very trick, I have power seats, and it's funny because they've just sort of attached this box with the power controls. Down here we've got important transfer gearbox information. The first is my favorite: engage diff lock before traction is likely to be lost. I like that Land Rover's telling you to think ahead. That's a good life lesson. Maybe think before you do something stupid, but that's all right. Anyway, and before we put it into gear, you'll notice that they put the gear locations on both sides of the shifter. I assume that was because they were lazy about left-hand drive and right-hand drive, and they just said, well, let's just make it even for both. We'll pull up on this little stalk, into drive, and off we go. There's very little natural encouragement from this vehicle to go fast or get deep into the pedal. All that torque is down low, and it seems that the transmission tuning wants us to stay there. But as we get off into crummier roads, I feel like that's where this is at home. Now, obviously, like I said, it's not a luxury vehicle, but it can handle it, and it's happy here. I could definitely picture using this in a city despite the miserable fuel economy that would result. But, I mean, you wouldn't really worry about hitting a bump in this thing. And the horn, not mounted here, it's actually on the blinker stock. There's all kinds of strange little controls, but not too confusing. You've just got to get used to the language of Land Rover. These brakes leave a bit to be desired. They certainly work, but you need quite a bit of force. A lot of pedal travel is required for sure. Wide open. $155 horsepower. I always find it funny when you've got a V8 that really doesn't make any more power than an old 4-cylinder Civic. But I guess the point of it was to be somewhat reliable and give you a bunch of torque down low, because something like this, if you're going to go off-roading or you're going to get stuck, you're not going to need high revs. You really just want all of the juice to come in between idle and like 2,000 RPM so you can crawl your way out. And I'm sure a lot of you folks are saying, well, why isn't it a manual? Wouldn't it be better as a manual? And maybe on the street it might be better as a manual, but I always prefer for an off-road vehicle, not that I'm a big off-roader, but a torque converter automatic certainly does the trick, because it means you can kind of lean on that throttle and apply the amount of torque that you need versus slipping the heck out of your clutch. You're not going to climb any steep hills in a hurry. I mean, you bury the throttle. The Defenders are the same way. My friend David has an 88 Defender, and you know, you downshift and floor it to get up some of the hills out in the mountains where we keep the car in New Hampshire. It's just the way it goes, but you know, you get used to it. You plan ahead. If you see a steep hill, you get a little bit of speed and hope there's no cops at the bottom of the hill. And if they do pull you over, just keep going. Tell them, if you stop now, you're not getting up. The steering, it's got a bit of heft to it when you're in a low speed situation, when you're in a parking lot, but It's actually quite easy to drive on the road. It's fairly light when you got it moving, and there's not a ton of dead play. Actually, there's very little of it. I mean, almost everything makes an impact. It's just that it's not a particularly fast steering ratio, so you've got to put a little bit of lock and a little bit of effort into just getting it around any ordinary corner. But the handling, it's still pretty confidence-inspiring. I'm ready to go. For the Always Sunny fans, you'll recognize this car especially from the breakfast episode where Dennis Reynolds is eating a bowl of cereal in his Range Rover, and it doesn't go well. There's an Instagram I follow called Vehicles of Nantucket, and I think this would fit in just fine there because, you know, island culture tends to have a very specific car culture, and this is it. I mean, if you're not buying a Defender, this would do the job. The seating position is very high. I cannot lower the seat any more than it already is. It does not go up and down. That's where you're at. So you just go fore and aft and then adjust your seat back as needed. We do have armrest, which I love. Always nice to have an armrest. I don't have one on my left side, but you can just use the door. To maintain speed, even on seemingly level ground, it feels like you always need some effort from this engine. You're always adding something, which is fine. And oh, very cool. We've got a green Tacoma up there to match our Cyprus Green Range Rover. That's great. Green came back in a big way. So what exactly is the market for a Range Rover like this? I think it's somebody who has a second home or is a quirky college student who doesn't need to go very far. If you've got a second home, let's say it's up in the mountains or you've got a little farmland somewhere in Vermont, you know, this is the greatest thing you could possibly have up there. This is your runabout. It's going to get you around your property. It's going to get you out to the local shops to get your errands done. It'll haul the people and the dogs, and you'll never get stuck. It's good for winter. It's good for all the things. Or you're kind of a quirky college student. I've got some friends like this who, you know, they don't want to drive a Hyundai Elantra. They want to drive strange vehicles, and this is perfect for strange folks. And frankly, if you own a Land Rover, you're going to learn how to fix cars because inevitably something is going to go wrong. These are somewhat maintenance heavy, but if you do keep up with it and you don't panic every time something goes wrong, you'll be just fine. But it's safe to say if you're somebody who panics every time they see a check engine light on in their car, this may not be for you because, you know, when something goes wrong, you have to understand it's a machine and it can be fixed. Every effect has a cause. So if the effect is your car stops running, you're going to go trace down what's going on with it. But so far on this drive, knock on walnut, things are going quite well. So thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks to the Bond Group for giving me the opportunity to drive a classic birth year car. I was born in 1988, so my 911's in 1988. I always like to drive 88 cars because it's kind of like finding out what was on the Billboard charts when you were born. Don't you forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. It's great because it just eats up all the bumps, and you don't have to think about it. Doesn't matter. It likes bumps. It prefers bumps.